reach the media, as Avis Foley, one of our founders and the wife of Tom Foley, who we credit for starting Living Streets, she found that it was often the quiet work behind the scenes that set in motion the wider changes. So campaigning with Living Streets is about starting conversations, creating community, and holding others to account. But ultimately, it's about change and making sure people have their say and their voices are heard. So we're going to hear about 4 different approaches to creating change across the UK that I hope will inspire you and unlock your own potential as a campaigner. So you might leave here today and start or join a local group, or add your voice to a local issue like protecting our city's air quality or advocating for people-centred urban planning, and ultimately making walking the most accessible and attractive choice for everyday journeys. So we're all here because we know there is a moment when you have to be prepared to put your time and energy into something which will improve your neighbourhoods and communities. So by coming together to share inspiration, we can all purposefully make our small and yet vital contribution to the places where we live and thrive. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next 4 speakers who've done just that. So let me tell you who we will be hearing from in this next session. We have David Harrison from our London Living Streets group talking about the need for partnership to promote walking in central London. We have David Wood, who is speaking on behalf of Isabel Leckie from our Edinburgh group, talking about the Causey Development Trust and the ambitious street redesign by the community, which is 10 years in the making. We have Brenda Pesh from our Hackney Living Streets group, who's asking who owns our streets and how can we use them to benefit the community. And Daniela Radici from Playing Out, looking at the capacity for our public spaces to be reimagined as places for play. So first of all, I'd like to introduce David Harrison, who's talking about walking routes in London.
Well, my aim this morning is to talk to you about the how to turn central London into a great walking place. It's something that London Living Streets and I have been working on for a year or so now, and we think we've come up with a very neat concept. But I have to say, I'm afraid, that I'll be annoying our President Terence by saying that our concept is really developed in opposition to the Hadid partners and Patrick Schumacher, but now I'll outline it. This is just a bit of background. We all know about the gross misallocation of space in central London, so I won't dwell on it. I particularly like this view when I used to sit in committee rooms in Portcullis House. You'd see this extraordinary pavements of Westminster Bridge full of pedestrians and sometimes empty roads. Of course, Crossrail is going to be a game changer. Vast numbers more people. On some estimates, 250 million people passing through 3 stations in central London. It clearly shows that the present misallocation of space can't continue. So we have a simple, delightful and elegant solution for creating a great walking network, for getting more people working in central London, and for creating a much better environment for those already walking. And I'm afraid to say I have to make a confession that before I started writing reports on transport in the 20th century, I studied medieval history and wrote a book about medieval bridges and roads. It looks very boring, but in fact that's because it's incredibly authoritative. But it did give me the answer or indication of just how to approach this. It's sometimes, people said that the medieval streets, that the city is full of medieval streets, and the city in Westminster are, but London also suffered for a huge extent of housemanization, if you'll forgive the recoining of that noun. A large number of big streets were smashed through for traffic in the 19th century and 20th century. Here we have Kingsway, 1906, destroying lots of houses. But it left parallel to it Drury Lane. You might not guess that Drury Lane was a medieval street, but a picture before some of the houses were demolished gives the indication. Why on earth should both these streets be used for through traffic? Surely one of them could be transformed into a medieval street. And of course, this has happened in some place in the city. This is Watling Street. So this is our suggestion. Use the ancient streets, improve them for walking routes, and keep the traffic to those big, horrid 19th century housemanized streets. There are huge benefits for this, for businesses and landowners. You recognise Covent Garden, Capco have seen phenomenal increases in their business through pedestrianising King Street. The tube is desperately overcrowded with short journeys. People could be walking instead if it was nice and they knew how to do it. There are many local residents in central London. Here are the children of St Clement's Danes. Again, pedestrianise some of those streets, or at least prevent through traffic, make better conditions, and walking to school will be so much better. It is also to be said that what we propose is an excellent fit with the Healthy Streets indicators, and I had to put this up as Lucy Saunders, of course, will be speaking later. And it's an inspiration to us all. So what we hope for is a network. And I think the point about a network is incredibly important. We have people coming in, 100 million passengers almost at Waterloo, some of whom will be going over Waterloo Bridge. So the people are coming to these great transport nodes. If they're tourists, there are huge visitor attractions like the British Museum. What we want to do is to make sure there are excellent routes that are joined up that will take them to their destination on foot in maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And to think about here, St Martin's Lane. Trafalgar Square to the British Museum should be a glorious walk. All it needs to do is to make improvements to St Martin's Lane and Monmouth Streets, and I'm sure the people will travel in that direction. So, finally, the next steps. And we mentioned partnership. I developed the idea with Colin Davis, who's a planner who made all the improvements to Fitzroy Square, and with the Urban Design Group. But obviously we can't do anything more as campaigners except float the idea. It's up to TfL, and we've had discussions with Will Norman. It's up to the London boroughs and the city to see how this concept might be taken forward. And to also agree what the precise routes will be and where the improvements might be. And these improvements must include junctions. So this is Blackfriars Station here, I think Upper Thames Street. It looks appalling. It's difficult to cross. You don't know where you're going. But if you could just get the signage and the crossing right, there is this lovely Blackfriars Lane, which is a glorious walk along a medieval town up to St Paul's. And finally, all I would say is that you can read far more about the idea on the new London Living Streets website, which is launched today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. We now have David Wood, who is talking to us about the Causey from the Causey Development Trust. In our programmes it says Isabel Leckie, but she couldn't come because she was attending a funeral today. So we're very grateful that David's come today to tell us about this wonderful project.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks very much to Living Streets for inviting us. So we're representing Edinburgh today, which I think people often think of as a very, very walkable city. It is, because it's a very dense city and the buildings go upwards, but we and many others think it could be even better. I'm the chair of the Causey Development Trust, and I'm a planner in my main job, working in a community engagement role. The Causey Development Trust is a small local charity run entirely by volunteers, and our project, as I will show you, is about turning a car-dominated space in Edinburgh into a place for people, and that has been done very much by a collaborative and community engagement-based report. In case I run out of time, I want to say at the start that we've had a huge amount of support from Living Streets Scotland, so thanks to Stuart Hay, who's here today, and Isabel, my colleague, is an active member of the Edinburgh Living Streets local group, and they've been incredibly supportive to us. I'm not sure that we started off as a campaigning organisation, but I think through our interaction with Living Streets, we've understood, the bigger agenda, that what started off as a very much one-off project, how that fitted into the sort of wider context that Living Streets is working in. So this is the place we're talking about. If you know Edinburgh, this is just near Edinburgh University, George Square, Buccleuch Place. At the moment, there's a main road in and out of Edinburgh, north-south route, and the whole space, including the main road and the traffic island, is what we're looking at transforming. And interestingly, you can just see where the cars are parked, the little narrow street. That, in fact, is very much a medieval walking route that's been around since we first saw it marked on maps in about 1600. And that is a bit of a rat run for cars and taxis. At the moment, you can only take your bicycle along one way. You see people carrying their bicycles along the pavement, sort of cycling the wrong way. So yeah, that's the place. It's very much a gateway as well to Edinburgh University, so students flow through this space. It's very much a victim, I think, of 1960s and 70s road car-dominated transport planning. We want to change that. It's maintained since the medieval period. You can just about understand a very distinctive triangular space. So could be one of a network of really attractive open spaces in Edinburgh. The Causey name comes from the little side streets called West Cross Causeway, so it's become known locally as the Causey. Okay, and there's also, a lot of listed buildings around the space, and two churches which face across each other, which you can't actually see in that photo, but we chose this photo because it does show how road-dominated the space is. So I'm going to time shift backwards to 2007, and this was a temporary 3-day transformation of the space that we did as part of an architectural festival. It was very much the creative vision of Alison Blomeyer and her colleagues. Alison died last year, and she's very much missed by the project and many other people. But they owned the building with the pillars, and I think sat looking out at the space and thought this could be somewhere so much better. So you can kind of see that if I had an aerial view, you would see that we created very clear walking routes. That's the pink sort of carpet across the site. Real grass was brought in. Bits of wood were used to level off the curbs. So at the moment you have to cross lots of curbs to get across the space. They were all removed. The concept, working with a sort of interactive artist, was a traffic island to tropical island, and we had ideas palm tree, which is actually a lamp post in the middle, and people put their ideas on that. It was very much welcomed by the local community. I walked past, I wasn't involved in the project at that point, and it's imprinted in my mind and lots of other people's mind how amazing it looked. And sometimes that's what it takes, is one person, a group of people, to have this amazing vision of how somewhere could be better, rather than thinking that's just how it is. So the response was so positive that the Causey Development Trust, which didn't exist at that point, was formed out of this idea. Yeah, and a sort of community engagement process embarked thereafter, doing ideas workshops with the local community. I don't have time to describe to you the whole process. It has been running for 10 years. It's very much been a project of partnership building with the council, with Sustrans Scotland, with Living Streets, with Edinburgh University, with local businesses, the 2 local churches who are represented on our steering group. And it's been a project about fundraising. It was quite easy to raise funds for all the community engagement. More difficult to raise funds for the actual building works, which we're still in the process of doing. We went through a quite complex procurement phase with Edinburgh Council in order to appoint a contractor, a landscape architect. So I will now jump forward again. I'm going to end up with this is a sort of fun, if you like, artist's visualisation of how the space could look and feel. It's not an exact representation of how the space will look. If you go onto our Twitter account, there's a pinned tweet that will take you to the correct item on the website about the actual project. But we're now at the stage of a second TRO, Transport Regulation Order process. We started with a slightly more ambitious proposal that would have stocked up the West Cross Causeway side street. We did meet with some local opposition, and I think that's, to everyone here, that's something that you have to expect when you try and change a space. We now have a second proposal, which is with the council, that we think will still achieve, the original vision of the 2007 project. So it's been a project about vision, about partnership building, about fundraising, and about sort of building links. We hope that we're actually going to achieve it. We're ready to transform the space. I think that's everything that I have to say. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter or have a look at our website, you will see more detail about the proposal. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, David. And now I'd like to introduce Brenda Pesh, who's going to be talking to us about People's Parking Bay, which is from our Hackney Living Streets local group.
Hello everyone. I'm going to tell you about my campaign for a parklet permit scheme in Hackney. In most of inner London, non-car owners are double the number of car owners. Yet all our curbside space is given over to car parking. This is unfair, and I feel those who do not have cars have as much right to use this space. The council already have a parklet programme, but it has only delivered 2 parklets over the last 4 years, partly because of the huge cost, about £50,000 each, and at this rate was not going to make a dent in the dominance of on-street car parking. It was also a very top-down approach. I felt the way forward was for people to be allowed to pay for a parklet permit in the same way as a parking permit. A bottom-up parklet programme would allow people to invest in their public realm in a creative way, with no loss of parking revenue and with minimal local authority input other than regulatory oversight and guidance. This was not an easy idea to convey. I felt I had no option but to resort to direct action to show how a parklet could be successfully created by a layperson at a fraction of the cost of an official council parklet, and how it could potentially transform a street. I was taking a big gamble. After applying for and being duly turned down for a parking permit, as a bench is not allowed a parking permit, I blatantly expropriated a car parking space in front of my home, launching my bay in May last year with help from Living Streets volunteers and with as much publicity as I could muster. My bay was flamboyant and colourful with a big red umbrella, a bench and table on a floor of artificial grass. I provided protection from motorists with 2 cast iron planters at the outer ends of the bay, which doubled as cycle stands. I filled it with flowers and plants. I put up a big sign inviting people to park themselves there. My parklet cost less than £1,000. Within a few days, the parklet had taken the neighbourhood by storm. It was spectacularly successful. Some thought the council had installed it. After getting enthusiastic feedback sellotaped onto the bay, I put out a visitor book. 7 of these filled up. It was loved on social media and received widespread news coverage. Lucy Saunders gave it full marks for healthy streets. It allowed people to take a rest on the way from walking, shopping, cycling, or running. It made people happy to be living in Hackney. It made strangers laugh and talk to each other. Children were its biggest fans. After 3 weeks, when the parklet received an inevitable eviction notice, there was universal outrage, and a petition to allow it to remain received nearly 1,000 signatures. The council did not relent, and I had to move the bay to other locations to outflank evictions. The bay was equally successful on other streets. It is now hibernating over the winter, but its success has given me hope that this idea has potential. What I'm asking for is a community-led scheme that allows people to apply for a parklet permit and invest in the public realm at minimal cost to the taxpayer. This would allow it to be quickly scalable and truly transformative for our streets, so that we could see a people parking bay on every street. So my question is, if permitted, would you apply for a parklet permit? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. So now I'd like to introduce Daniela Radici from Playing Out, talking about play streets.
Hi, thanks. It's great to be here. So why am I here? I'm here firstly as a parent and a resident, and I've always been someone campaigning to make my street better. One of my friends, my children, said, "Can you help organise a street party?" So now for many years I've organised street parties on my street and just made my area much more livable and playable. Then when my kids went to school, I'm a bit of a local campaigner, I got involved in campaigning to make the area around the school safer. With some of the parents, we made a film about trying to educate parents about not driving to school. And more recently, I'm setting up a play street around the school to try and reduce parents driving to school. And partly as a result of that other campaigning activity, I now have a national role, and I work for Playing Out, which is a small community interest company. And my role is to bring street play to the whole of the UK. Playing Out has a vision, and the vision is that children will be able to play freely outside their own front door, like they used to. And we're part of a growing movement of people supporting children's right to play out. But Playing Out can also be used as a tool to create behaviour change around schools for parents and children. So what's it all about? So, back in 2009, two mothers, Amy and Alice, realised that their children didn't have the same freedom that they'd had when they were growing up. Their children couldn't just go outside their front doors and play. And they noticed that no children were really going out to play because children under the age of 10 or 11 were being accompanied everywhere. So what they thought was, what can we do to change the situation? And so they just thought about an intervention where they decided to close their street, like a street party application, but they didn't have any particular games or anything. They just shut the street and let the children come out to play. And they did. And it had a transformative effect on their streets and their neighbourhood. And other neighbouring streets got interested in it. It grew slowly. And then with the support of Bristol City Council sort of used the legislation, looked sort of through the legislation and came up with a temporary play street order. And this allows residents to close their street, to apply to close their street up to once a week or once a month for a whole year, just with one application that's free. And the temporary play street order allows people to close their street. When you close your street under the play street model, you have stewards at either end, and residents still retain access to their houses. You only shut a street to through traffic. So it's trying to just normalise that feeling of children being out and playing in the streets again. So this idea is spread across the UK nationally. It's now taken root in about 50 local authorities. And also the next sort of bit from that is also school play streets, and saying, why don't we close streets after schools so that parents can't drive up the school gates, and we create a much safer, playable spaces around schools. And this is particularly taken off in Hackney Council and in Bristol. So how do you actually do a play street? The most important thing to do is the engagement bit first, is talking to neighbours and the schools. For the one that I'm involved with, the school, we actually had an open space meeting at the school. We invited all the residents of the street and neighbours and parents and the school. We all came together to discuss what we were going to do to change things, to make things safer for children walking to school. So the next thing is to try and get permission from the council, apply through the temporary play street process. If your local council doesn't have a temporary play street process in place, come and talk to me. I can help you get that going. And then you just have to advertise it. And we've got lots of information on our website about how to do this, and signs and posters and things that can be used. And then find some stewards and close the street and play out. And children just love the free play option. So street plays had massive impact. We know that it's great for children, it's great for their well-being. They make friends, they get exercise. The Department of Health report done by the University of Bristol has measured their exercise, but it's not just exercise, it's meeting children of different ages, socialising and making local friends. It's great for parents. A lot of people get to know people on their street because it's regular, so you build up much stronger communities. The other aspect is active citizenship. Once people have shut their street, they go on to do other things. For example, Catherine in Worthing was a play street pioneer. She campaigned for 20 miles an hour. And in Enfield, Claire Rogers got involved in the Better Streets for Enfield campaign. So it's really led people on to take further action. And finally, we're like you. We want long-term culture change. We want children to play out just like they used to.
Thank you to all of our speakers, and do take the opportunity to stop them over lunch to ask how you could maybe bring one of those innovative approaches into your area. I certainly found it very inspiring, as always. So we will be holding a fringe event after the summit at 4:45 for local groups and those interested in campaigning. So if you're interested, then please join us for that session. And if you're interested in setting up a local group or getting active locally, then you can come and find me at the supporters stall over lunch. So thank you very much, and I now hand back to Terence.